I always tell people if it was called Cameron's Fishing Blog, like it would have zero readership.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Remote No Pressure podcast. We're super excited to be here this week for this week's episode for the Fiberglass Manifesto with Cameron Mortenson. So that's going to be an amazing episode, and I'm here with Wild Bill.
Hey, how y'all doing?
How you doing, Bill?
Doing well, yourself?
Good. You ready for the holidays to be over?
I am. We're almost there. It's the home stretch, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it's been a great season already. It's been an awesome season for the podcast, but also just a great holiday season with family and friends. So my question to you is, what is the craziest or the worst thing that you've ever bought online?
Oh, wow. I really got to think about that one for a minute. Craziest or the worst thing I've ever bought online?
Yeah, say you bought something and it was advertised as like something cool and you got it and it's like a third of the size you thought it would be.
Oh, yeah. I've ordered clothes from China, like flannel shirts. And Chinese sizes are not what American sizes are. And I was a bigger dude back then. I've ordered like a 3X flannel shirt, and it's maybe the size of a large here in America.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was one of the worst. I mean, like back in the early eBay days, I bought a soundboard on eBay. Do you remember eBay?
Yeah.
And so I bought this nice British soundboard. It was an Allen & Heath.
Sure.
And I got it, and it cost me like $200 to freight to my house, and the stupid thing didn't work.
Really?
And so I got a hold of the seller, had to have it sent back on my dime, another $200 in freight. And yeah, so that was a lesson learned with eBay. I'm not a big eBay person these days.
Yeah, whatever happened to eBay?
I don't really know. I know they got their hand in a few different things. Like I think didn't they buy PayPal?
I think so, or PayPal bought them or something like
One
that.
or the other, but they're still a thing, I guess. I just don't really check them out anymore.
Yeah, I don't either. I work with heavy equipment a lot, and they have some auction site now for heavy equipment, but it's just kind of like there's nothing ever good on there, and it's just kind of back in the day it was a big thing.
Oh yeah, 20 years ago.
I sold a Pro Tools rig one time
on eBay
to a celebrity.
Ooh,
and
who was it?
I'm not going to say his name.
Oh,
but he was using this name. Well. Okay, so what happened is I didn't know he was a celebrity, okay? As usual, my head's in the sand.
Like a local celebrity? Or
No, this is like
this Bill Murray? Was it Bill Murray?
No. No, he was a like a televangelist. Okay? So I didn't know him. I didn't know who he was, So
like a local televangelist?
No,
I'm just gonna keep running.
What's his name? Did it start with a B? No. So I sold it to like this. I guess he's like a really big time televangelist.
Wow.
And I didn't know who he was. And so I sold it. He got the winning bid, and I was supposed to send it like within 30 minutes or whatever. I guess he was expecting that. Well, I ended up sending it like 2 days later. Okay. So then before I could get to the UPS store, because it was quite a big, box and stuff, he like within 24 hours, he went on my eBay, didn't email me or anything, and just started bashing me like, this is a fake seller and all this other stuff. I was like, what are you talking about? So anyway, so I was already kind of ticked at the guy, and I'm like, all right, whatever. So I'm at the UPS guy, and I was like, I need to go ahead and mail this. And the guy looks at the name on the package and he says, is that the blank? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. He said, the blank, the name of the celebrity, insert name. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know who that is. So I get out to like my car and I email the guy and I'm like, hey, are you the with a capital T? Are you the blah, blah? And he's like, whatever, Jeff, just send me the and it was him.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and he was using like his real name or like it looked like his name or whatever. But it was
a ploy to have better service.
Maybe.
And it didn't work, so he bashed you anyways.
Maybe. I don't know.
Did he ever get rid of that negative? Did he give you negative feedback on there?
I don't remember.
That's one of my pet peeves is those negative feedbacks. Anybody can do it.
Anybody can do it. Mm-hmm. Hey, we talked last week or a couple weeks ago about the 3-star review for the pizza place down the street. It's like, that's pretty good for for a pizza shop. 3 stars. It's relatively clean.
It makes sense for that place.
A mouse or two.
Yeah.
But nothing too crazy. We got a 3-star review this week.
Oh, did we?
Yeah, we got a 3-star review. So I guess we can do a little bit better. Maybe there's a mouse in the studio.
But we could do worse.
We could do worse.
I see that as a passing score.
That's all right, But anyway, so be sure to go online and leave us a review. We really want to hear back from you guys and how we're doing. And also, speaking of the worst things that you've ever bought from China, the reason I ask you this question is that, we sell a few things on our website with the decals and things. And I just want people to know that, first of all, we're not importing that from China. Are drop shipping it at this point. It's something that we haven't, like the decals are in my bedroom or in my office or whatever. But also that when you buy those things, it's to help support the show.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, let me ask you this question, because there's some podcasters that do what is it called? Where you pay like a monthly,
a subscription box?
No, it's like gosh, what is it called? Well, basically,
like a Patreon. Or?
Patreon. Yeah. There's some people that do like the Patreon, right, to help support the podcast. So they'll do like a Patreon, and then people will go there and donate money every month, like $5 a month, And with that $5, you get exclusive this or exclusive that, Mm-hmm. But the way I feel is like if someone gives me money, I want to give them something back. It's like an exchange of goods. So that's how we support the show versus Patreon or versus. Something like that. Not saying that we'll never do that. It's just like
We're not at that step yet.
I grew up kind of old school. Like you work for your money. You work hard.
We're not looking for handouts,
right?
But if you want to hand something out, I'm not going to turn it down.
Yeah, exactly.
It is the Christmas season.
Yeah. No, but you know what I'm saying. Like it's really hard for me to. But I think as a society, we don't want to pay for content. We want content for free. What do you think about that?
No, I completely agree with that. Of course, we come from the era of Napster and online. What was that called? Music theft, I guess.
LimeWire,
Napster, all that social stealing, so to speak, where you're sharing files. File sharing. That's what it was.
File sharing. Yeah. And
I was used to I'm not going to pay for this album. Sometimes if I would download an album before I would buy it, though, because if it was a good album and from a band I wanted to support, I'd buy it then. But otherwise, we come from a generation that we want free media, free content.
Free content.
Yeah.
But you know what? What I think about like Napster and LimeWire is they had like this great business model. Mm-hmm. And they could have monetized it like Spotify or whatever, and they would still be in business.
I wouldn't even call it a business model. I think it was a dude who just created a program,
right?
In his dorm room, and the
rest is history.
Yeah, didn't really think about where it could go. And what did LimeWire turn into? I mean, wasn't that just viruses and? Yeah,
you download a song and it would turn into a porn video or something. You never knew what you were really gonna get.
Yep.
So it was always kind of like a random.
Any minute now, it's going to kick into that song. I'm just going to... No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. It was just a crazy thing. Oh, my gosh. Yeah, if you notice, I'm not laughing as much, Bill. I've been sick, and I'm scared if I laugh, then I'll start coughing, and then there's these edits that have to.
But you sounded better than you were a month ago. You were coughing a lot more.
Oh, I was. Yeah. I was definitely. And some of those interviews I did during that time period, I think I'm gonna have to re-record.
Oh,
because there was so much coughing. I should have just been okay, scrap it. Well, I should have rescheduled it. But I'm one of those guys I just like to push through.
Yep, I know what you mean. I like to work through sickness. I hate using sick days.
I do. I hate being sick. Yep. I hate it slowing me down. But when I get sick, I just want to sleep. That's all I want to do. Yeah. So then I feel lazy.
I think that's an important part of feeling better is getting the extra sleep in like that to help you heal quicker.
And going fishing.
In
the cold and the steel, going fishing for steelhead. If you got a cold, you don't wear a hat, maybe a t-shirt.
Yep. Why even wear waders? Yeah. Why even wear waders?
Just wet wade.
That's it.
There's nothing that'll get you over the
thermogenesis. We already talked about that.
Well, this week we have Mr. Cameron Mortenson from the Fiberglass Manifesto blog, and he's got an unbelievable blog all about fishing with fiberglass rods. And so we're very excited to have him here. We're very excited to have you guys here listening every week like you do on the Remote No Pressure podcast. Welcome to the podcast. Let's light the fire. Well, today on the Remote No Pressure podcast, I'm super excited to have Cameron Mortenson with us. Thanks for hanging out with us, Cameron.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
Now, you run a blog, the Fiberglass Manifesto, correct? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, as of September, I've been writing this website for 10 years, and it started out just as a way to talk about what was going on in fiberglass fly rods, which 10 years ago, there was maybe a dozen companies and rod builders that were offering glass. And then if you fast forward to now, there's probably over 100. So it's been pretty neat to kind of chronicle that and be a source of information for people that are interested in glass. And truly, when I started the website, I really thought I was going to run out of things to talk about. And in the beginning, I would only post like every 3 to 5 days because I really thought that there was going to be an end, where somebody was just going to turn the faucet off and there was just going to be nothing more to talk about with glass. But just the opposites happened. And I mean, hardly a day goes by that there's not a rod builder, do something pretty striking, or, a rod company's, coming up with new ideas in glass, or there's small shop rod builders that are designing new tapers or new offerings. So it's been pretty exciting to see grow over the last 10 years.
Do you know Brandon Bales by any chance?
I do.
Yeah. And he's a big fiberglass junkie as well, correct?
He is.
Yeah.
And I get super envious because as much as I like trout, all the native basses and sunfish that he catches are pretty inspiring. I want to get out on our family pond every time I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's been on the podcast. I believe he's the one that recommended me talk to you. But I kind of ask you the same question I asked him. I mean, a lot of people like bamboo, or they like some of the classics, and but why fiberglass? What makes you a fiberglass geek? I think you a self-proclaimed fiberglass geek.
Well, my very first fly rod was a $20 Eagle Claw Featherlight that I'd picked it up in a sports shop in northern Michigan, and fished that rod for a little bit. This was before internet. This was before, really the only source of knowledge was either hang out in a fly shop or which I really didn't have too much access to then. So I was, combing through library books and magazines, and everything I was reading was talking about graphite. And so very quickly I put the Featherlight in the back of the closet and fished a bunch of graphite for, probably 6 or 8 years. And it wasn't until I moved down to South Carolina that, I pulled it out and figured, kind of gave it a wiggle and just figured that I could take it down to the pond. We have a family pond here, about 100 acres, and figured I could, catch some bluegills and bass on it, and that it would be okay for that. And it really just like opened this new door into fly fishing that I wasn't even aware of. And by then, there was the internet. And so that was about 12 years ago. And hopped on the Fiberglass Fly Rodders forum and started really deep diving into fiberglass and the history of it, and had all these different vintage rods. And I really didn't have a budget to work with, so I was buying and selling and trading $20 to $50 fly rods just to figure out what I liked. And that turned into saving money for custom fly rod builds, which turned into me like getting rid of all my graphite, like just selling off everything and reinvesting into fiberglass rods. And there wasn't that many makers or rod builders or rod companies that offered glass back then. And just over time, the addiction continues, and I don't think I've fished a graphite rod in probably 10 or 12 years at least. It's just 100% glass, from 1-2 weight all the way up to 2-handers and heavyweight glass, and 9, 10, 12 weights.
What's your favorite rod?
It depends on what I'm doing. I still do a decent amount of trout fishing, but I'm really drawn to flat style fishing, everything from carp to redfish to bonefish to, even though I haven't caught one yet, getting kicked in the nuts, going after a permit. So I fish a lot of heavy line weight glass, everything from an 8 weight to a 10 weight. Really like the Epic rods. The Epic Bandit is kind of the rod that I always make sure I take anywhere, because I've caught everything from carp on it to, an 80-pound blacktip shark.
Wow.
So it's like that one rod that you always take with you. But I really like the Echo Quick Shot lineup, and those are 6 weight through 10 weight. So it's like right in my wheelhouse as far as everything from smallmouth bass to saltwater species, are perfect for that. And I just get excited about so many different, custom fly rod builders. And, like today on the website, talking about Dusty Smith at Livingston Rod Company, and he's got a new series of glass. That'll give him 3 different glass series that he has coming out. So, and I know you interviewed Chris Barclay, and he does, amazing things with glass. And a really neat part of this whole thing is that in the beginning, everybody was swimming in the same pool. Everybody was, trying to do a 7-foot 3 weight and a 7.6 4 weight and an 8-foot 5 weight. And, fast forward 10 years and you've got people like Chris that are really into parabolic or semi-parabolic rods. So, he's kind of gone down his path. And then you've got, other people, like Dusty Smith, where, a lot of his rods are longer glass, more, applicable for Western waters. And then, you've got, the Swift fly rods, are more of a progressive taper. So now instead of everybody swimming in the same swimming pool, you've got all these smaller pools that, everybody's doing their own thing. And I think that's advantageous not only for rod builders and rod companies, but it's really to the benefit of, anglers that enjoy glass, because there's just so many choices across so many different price points, with so many different actions, that when somebody, sends me an email like, hey, what should I be looking at? I can, give somebody, anywhere from a couple to, a dozen different choices. So it's nice to have that many choices for people to look at.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's becoming a more and more affordable sport, like you're saying, all the different rod builders now in every price range, it seems like. But so there's a friend of mine down by Austin. His name's Aaron, and Aaron Reed, and he told me, you need to interview Chris Barclay, So I interviewed Chris Barclay. Well, I'm a native Texan, so we all kind of grew up, in Texas, and it turns out he's got Aaron just emailed me, and I gotta hook up with Chris, because he was telling me that he bought all the wood, all the floor from the bowling alley down in Nacogdoches, Texas, when they tore it down, which is I lived in a small town called St. Augustine for the first 10 years of my life. And we'd all go to Nacogdoches to eat at La Hacienda, which is a restaurant. And then we'd, go bowling and stuff like that. Well, it turns out he's making rods out of this wood from the bowling alley. So I'm super stoked, but it's even though it's a glass rod, there's this heritage and this history. There's more to it than just, do you know what I mean? Okay, so my grandpa didn't fly fish with one of these, but this is something I could hand out to my kids. It's I think, I know this is kind of poetic or maybe kind of out there, but if you think about where we are in the community of fly fishing, I mean, it's not just dry flies anymore. We're seeing this huge change, and this tide is changing, and we have this new stuff coming out that that we'll hand off to our kids and our grandkids, and it's just, I think the fiberglass market, like you're talking about, is indicative of what we're experiencing in the culture. Would you agree to that?
Well, and if you think about it, there's guys on the Fiberglass Fly Rodders Forum or the Classic Bamboo Forum that are, they're clamoring for rods that were made 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. Wow. And I think that this resurgence of glass, our grandchildren, are going to be looking back, and they're going to be trying to collect up all the rods that are in, my closet or that are in, your rod rack. So it's going to happen all over again. And there's, right now, there's no better time to be a fiberglass fly rodder. I mean, there's just so many choices, and there's so many different stories behind the rods about where things are sourced. And, there's blanks that are coming from Japan, and there's blanks that are coming from New Zealand, and there's blanks that are rolled in the U.S., and there's blanks that are rolled in small batches, and they have, these really great stories, but then it's all these different components and the maker. And, you talk to somebody like Matt Lederman, he does all of his own metal work. And, when you get a rod from him, you're getting something that's very special, that's had a ton of his own hand time put on every part of that rod. Same with Chris. They're doing so many pieces of that work themselves that it may be a $600 or $700 fly rod, but really, when you compare that to even a rod that comes from a rod company, you're likely getting a product that's been even more hands-on and meticulous by that one person than it getting passed around the shop to different maker, different parts of the process. So, I've always thought it's pretty neat to have that kind of one-on-one connection between the builder and the angler that's going to fish that rod.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think that's definitely a valid point. Now, my question to you is, and I ask this question to a lot of people who work, in this space. Now, what is your day job, by the way?
I'm in law enforcement. So for the last about 17 and a half years, I've worked with a police department here in the Midlands of South Carolina. It's a city of about 25,000 people, and I've been really fortunate to have a lot of different jobs within the department, everything from a patrol officer to work traffic division, had a canine, worked narcotics for a number of years, worked general investigations, and then for the last, about the last 4.5 years, I've worked with our community action team, I've worked with our school resource officers, and then I also do our department's social media and public information. So I'm the guy writing news releases and doing interviews or prepping the chief, to do interviews when we have something happen. So it can be kind of a crazy, it is a crazy job, more days than not. But it's also one I get a lot of personal satisfaction out of. And on the flip side, having TFM for the last 10 years has, really opened doors to a lot of different relationships outside of law enforcement. It's very easy for first responders to stay in this circle where all of your friends are in that same profession, which isn't always good. It gives you too much time to think about work and the politics of it and, what's happening all the time. So having both, a strong family life and then also, fly fishing and writing the Fiberglass Manifesto has given me a space completely outside of law enforcement that, has given me a lot of opportunities to go places and do things with people. And it's been healthy for me, both, mentally.
Well, hello, everyone. We're going to just take a little minute out of the podcast. Thank you so much for listening intently. We partnered up with the boys over at Flood Tide Co. With Paul Puckett and the boys over there. If you go to floodtideco.com and then type in remote no pressure at checkout, you'll get a 25% discount. And I tell you what, guys, this stuff there is second to none. It really is amazing at some of the clothing and some of the things they have over there. Paul Puckett is just not just an awesome human being. If you go back and listen to his episode here on the podcast, but also their company, it just really, it really captures the heart of saltwater fly fishing and the spirit of that area where they're located in the South. And I just love it. So go to floodtideco.com, type in remote no pressure at checkout to receive a 25% discount. Special thanks to Paul Puckett and the guys over there for offering our listeners a 25% discount. It's very, very generous. Also, we have a trip coming up to Chile here at the end of February. So if you are at all interested, email me at jefft@remotenopressure.com and we can get your reservation. We need to have a head count by December 31st. So if you could get to me if you're at all interested, that would be great. Speaking of our website at remote-no-pressure.com, we sell decals, and we also partnered up with Deli Fresh Design. We partnered up with them, so we have our logo on their sling packs and also on the beer koozies and a couple of items. And the reason we do that is, and when you buy things directly from us on our website at remote-no-pressure.com, that goes to help support the podcast. It goes to help to keep us online. I mean, there's fees for hosting our website, hosting the podcast. When you buy things, we just really appreciate that. We really appreciate it. And there's other ways to sponsor a website like Patreon, and I know there's a lot of other alternatives. But when you I'm kind of old school, so I want to provide you something when you give us money. So basically, you're purchasing that product from us, just like you would go to a store or whatever, and that profit goes back into the company to help grow the podcast and also bring in interesting guests and better quality. And but we just really appreciate all that you guys have done and the people who have purchased things. So be sure to go check out remote-no-pressure.com. Also sign up for our mailing list, and let's get back to our podcast. What drove you to create the Fiberglass Manifesto? And what we've had, let's see, Amanda Monti was on our podcast. She's a Northern Michigander who fights fires out west. She's a real badass. So we had her.
She's a real badass.
Do you know her by any chance?
I do know her.
Okay.
So she's a badass, and I'm really impressed with her writing.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's an amazing human being, like everyone I've talked to. But she was. We were talking. I told her the same story. We had some neighbors across the street growing up who were firefighters. And every weekend they were like cooking out, they were so close and such a tight knit group of people. You would swear they were having a giant family reunion every single weekend, and they were so close. They were closer to each other than they were their families. So I could definitely see how that could be. So you started the Fiberglass Manifesto. Was it just to have a creative outlet to get your mind? I mean, that's a very stressful job. I mean, has it been effective? Can you tell us a little bit about your experience over the last 10 years and maybe a couple of things that have happened because of the Fiberglass Manifesto, some good stories or something like that?
Well, you know what? When I started TFM, I really didn't know what I was doing at all. In fact, I think I did a Google search for how to start a blog without really a complete idea of what I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it, other than just wanted to talk about fiberglass fly rods and talk about the people and the companies that were making them. And so I kind of just felt my way through it. I've always had an artistic side, mostly with drawing and painting when I was younger. That kind of transitioned into photography and trying to learn about that. And the writing was just, if you're going to post pictures online, that you got to kind of write something as well. And then just, I would say the first couple of years, I was pretty haphazard about it. And the turning point and the story that there's probably, I would say, two turning points. First off, I had someone that was pretty critical of TFM in the beginning and told me that I was doing, everything was wrong. The name was wrong. Having such a niche blog was wrong. And it really, only maybe have done it for like a year. It kind of shook me, and I was like, maybe I should just hang it up. Maybe this isn't good and it's not worthwhile. And, about that same time, I had reached out to Brian O'Keefe, photographer, and, I knew he had a glass background, and I asked him if he would just do a write-up and send some pictures. And I don't know, like his response came exactly at the right time, because there was a lot of things that he said in that post that resonated with me. And it just really backburnered that negative conversation, and I just kind of pressed on. The other part of it is that, I still continue to feel my way through it, and I just enjoyed the process of creating. Most of my days, a lot of people, write days and weeks ahead. And really my process for the last, 10 years has been, wake up, 4:30 or so in the morning, make coffee, and then sit down and write the content for the day, answer emails. And I just like that. That's a great way for me to start my day. I've got an hour and a half where kind of hash through, different ideas and, work on interviews or work on, the day's blog posts and then go to work. So it's been a great way for me to have that creative release. And, along the way, I've learned a lot. Still, I still don't feel like I know what I'm doing. But, every day I just, put a couple posts together and get them posted up. The other thing that it's done is that not only have I been able to talk about rod builders, but that very niche focus on just rod builders has then, kind of broadened out to, other writers or photographers or small shop gear makers, and then reel makers and, everything from skateboards to, I've got something that I'm working on right now where I sent a cigar box that had cigars in it from when my daughter was born, and this guy wanted to trade, a fly rod for a ukulele that he built out of it. And so just that, creating some content about this ukulele that was, born out of a cigar box that had cigars in it when my 13-year-old daughter was born. So there's just so many different ways that the website's gone, and along with it's come invitations to fish places that I would never have gotten a chance to do. Everything from northern Michigan, started fishing Beaver Island with Kevin and Steve, to going down and to Mexico and Belize and out west, and just a long list of places that I would never have had the opportunity otherwise.
Well, that's an excellent story. I mean, when you were growing up, you grew up in Grand Ledge, Michigan, right?
I did.
What took you down? You're in North Carolina now?
South Carolina.
Okay.
Grew up in Grand Ledge and, went to school down in Berrien Springs, Michigan for college. And my wife was also going to college there, and things were progressing pretty good with our relationship, and we ended up getting engaged, and we flew out to Colorado for a wedding and really enjoyed it. And she was about ready to graduate, and she graduated, and we ended up moving out to Colorado right after we were married. We lived there for about a year, and she was getting homesick and felt like we were missing out on some things that were going on in South Carolina. So we picked up and moved here, and I will say it transitioned to get used to kind of the loss of real four definitive seasons like you have in Michigan. Or get used to eating things like boiled peanuts. But 18 years later, I really enjoy the barbecue down here. It's nice to be able to wear shorts 12 months a year. I've finally gotten so I enjoy eating boiled peanuts. So
wow.
I really enjoy living down here, and we're in a great position where we're only, we're less than 2 hours away from Charleston. So you've got redfish and just a lot of things that are going on in that area. And we're less than 2 hours away from Asheville as well. So you can get a trout fix. We've got a lot of different fly fishing opportunities right here in the middle of the state with striped bass that run up the river, and there's trout in the river and a lot of native basses that are nearby. And then redfish and sharks and sea trout and just a bunch of salt species that are down on the coast.
Now, do you have children or?
We do. So we have a 13-year-old daughter, Hadley Wren, and our son is 9 years old, Hayden Phineas, and we just call him Finn.
That's a really cool name. Are they into fly fishing as well? Has this become? I know, like your most recent blog entry, your wife went out with you. Looks like she got rained on there. But do you guys? Is this like a family affair, or is this like just something Dad does in spare time?
I would say it's mostly what Dad does, but both Hadley and Finn are getting more and more interested in it. And I've tried to always just have it there for them to pick up and do if they want to. We've done quite a bit of spin fishing together, but they're both getting to that point where they've either done some fly fishing with me or they want to do more. But it's been one of those things where I just didn't want to force it on them. And I'll be honest, I hadn't picked up a spinning rod for, probably 10 or 15, well, probably 15 years. And I've had a really good time just going spin fishing with them. Sometimes when they want to learn how to fly fish, I'm more like, hey, let's keep throwing the spinning rods because I'm having a good time doing it. But so that's been a neat transition to just, I think it's easy for fly anglers to get kind of snooty and feel like we're doing something better than everybody else. But in the end, it's just so much fun to fish. And there's some real advantages to having a spinning rod in your hands over a fly sometimes.
It's funny you say it because I grew up on the Texas coast fishing for redfish, and we always, fish with spinning gear. And up here in Michigan, my father-in-law is the one that taught me how to fish in the rivers. And when he first taught me, my wife and I have been married almost 14 years now, and he our first Christmas after my wife and I had gotten engaged, he bought me a pair of waders and was like, "I'm gonna take you fishing." So he takes me fishing, and it's all with spinning gear, And I'm thinking, like, who would, after coming from the saltwater, like, this is lame, I couldn't appreciate it. And then I went and did it. I'm like, holy crap, and I hooked into my first king salmon, and then also my first steelhead, and then it was just an addiction. But we always use spinning gear. Well, I switched to flies about 4 years ago. And in the steelhead season, I have an 8-weight that I'll use for steelhead and stuff. But I went out this past week with my buddy, and I'm fishing these holes, and I'm trying to get down there where I need to be, and just working it. And then my back cast, as some of the Michigan rivers, it's all roll casting. You can't really back cast in a lot of those tight spots. And I'm like, man, I really could use my spinning rod right now. It's like, I really could do some spin fishing right now. I'm not gonna lie, but there is a beauty to that you get when you forget and you go back to it and you're like, wow, this spinning gear's kind of nice. So
I think it's important for people to realize that whether you're lure fishing or you're fly fishing, how important it is to be outside.
Right.
And not take yourself too seriously. Just because you're a fly angler doesn't mean you're any better than anybody else that's on the water. I think there's a lot to learn from no matter what style of fishing that you do.
Yeah, and I think that attitude is changing slowly, but I think it's changing where fly fishermen are not so snooty, But yeah, it's great. Well, I appreciate having you on. Like, what's kind of next for you and for the Fiberglass Manifesto? Are you planning on just continuing doing that and blogging, or what's next for you, Cameron?
Well, I mean, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing while, as long as people keep checking in. It's interesting as social media changes, trying to, I'm not a young guy, but still trying to keep up with, what's good there. And I've had a lot of fun lately, figuring out Instagram stories. And I think there's ways that you can have something like a website, but then also, keeping an active social media presence going. And there's ways to tell stories in both places, or, make sure that those stories transition over. So I continue to have fun with both of those. And I guess as this year winds down, we're sitting down kind of mapping out next year's trips and which ones are going to be fly fishing only trips that I take, and then which ones are family trips and where we're going. But I've got a Louisiana trip in January, hoping to get back down to Belize. And then, of course, I'll be going back up to Beaver Island, Michigan. That's my kind of annual summer trip that I do every year to go chase carp and smallmouth and pike up there. So those are the ones that are on the forefront right now. But, just keep at what I'm doing and keep sniffing out anybody that's talking about new glass ideas and keep talking about it. So it's neat to see so many anglers that that get excited about it. And, there's one guy I fished with in Texas 2 months ago that he picked up a glass rod, one of the Echo quick shots, and he's catching redfish down the Atlantic coast with them. And, I could just see, and he's saying, like, it's just changing everything. It's so much more fun, and he's having such a great time doing it. So it's neat to see people, just get attached to it and start figuring out. It might not be something that they do 100% like I do, but it's neat for them to have, a couple rods in their lineup that they can grab and just have a good time with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Beaver Island's on my list next year. Obviously it's not as far for me as it is for you, but, and also, looking over your blog as I was prepping for the episode, I mean, there's some really big smallmouth up on Beaver Island, and that's pretty sweet. Some of those pictures you've taken are pretty awesome.
Yeah, we've seen fish that are over 8 pounds that you'll kind of ease up on a flat and they'll just kind of ease off and swim off, kind of break your heart. But there's some fish that are so big that initially be like, there's a carp at 3:00, and then when you get within casting range, you're like, oh, that's not a carp, that's a smallie. So
it's insane.
It's a pretty amazing place. And, whether it's climate change or it's just heavy winters or whatever you want to blame it on, the last 5 years, every year is different. The lake levels keep going up, and these fish that used to be right on a very defined shoreline are now super far back in the trees. I mean, things that are filling up with water that haven't had water in decades. So it's, when you look at the maps of all the different islands up there, they would show ponds that were dry. And now those ponds are getting filled back up. And so every summer that I go up there, we're finding fish in new and interesting places. And, because of the way the lake freezes, there's places that were, like forested, and then it'll freeze, and then that ice will just kind of chop everything off, just pull all the trees out of the forest. So, a place that this year has trees, next year that might just be rocks with, like a pile of limbs off in the corner where they get moved around. So it means the guides that are up there have to, kind of relearn things summer to summer, and it makes it it's turned it into a really interesting game where these fish are at every day.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, if people wanted to check out your blog, where would they go to do that, Cameron?
Well, you can go to the fiberglassmanifesto.com, and then be sure to follow along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Try to keep those pages active, and then I try to share, posts that go up, get shared some way on those pages as well.
Great. Well, we'll put all those up in the show notes, and we really appreciate you taking some time for us. Your blog is great. It's awesome. And I think the Fiberglass Manifesto is a pretty sweet name. So that's really cool, man.
I always tell people if it was called Cameron's Fishing Blog, like it would have zero readership. So I think that, having kind of a catchy name, will grab people's attention to click through. Fortunately, it's looked at as a resource, and I'm always happy to take emails. I get a lot of people that either call or email, with questions or suggestions. So I'm super easy to be reached through the website, and always, happy to help out. I get a lot of enjoyment, pointing people the right way, and then I'll get emails back about, how much they've enjoyed that fly rod. So I get a kick out of it.
That's awesome. Well, thank you very much, Cameron.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Cameron, and thank you for joining us on another episode of the Remote No Pressure Podcast. Every week when me and Bill get together, we're so excited to bring you guys another guest. Be sure to check out our website at remotenopressure.com. Leave us a review. And also, if you're interested in that trip, be sure to email me at jefft@remotenopressure.com. And until next time, go fishing.